It's Tuesday, March 19th. Today I started using this book to go over what kinds of powers the president has and what the Constitution says about them. So over here is the couple of the pages that we used, and I'm going to give you the quickie version of what happened in class today because we went over some of these things. So starting at the beginning of what the Constitution says about the president, it says the president has executive power. So remember, that's a word we used before when we were looking at city government, how the mayor of the city is not the lawmaker, doesn't represent parts of the city, represents the whole city. So the president is kind of like the mayor of the country in a way. We'll look at what the lawmakers can do later on in the Constitution. This is the part where it says that they hold their office for 4 years. And one thing I shared in class is that actually early drafts gave a different number of years. They even talked about adding more years, like 20 between elections for president, but they narrowed down from 7. And then one of the last changes they did was made it 4. So it's always been 4 between elections since the Constitution, but it wasn't always that way. All right, so the president is an executive. They get power for 4 years. There's a vice president that we'll get into here. And then the next thing they show is this map that hopefully looks kind of familiar. This is how the electoral college system works. If I go back, right, there are some words at the bottom there about this electoral college and electors. So the people don't directly elect the president. This is a weird because it's the only place in the world that actually elects anyone this way. The numbers are different over here. Like California's got 55. Some of the other ones have a lot less. It's based on population. So the more people, the more elector votes. But basically the way it works is the states are really electing the president. And this, as I was saying in class, goes back to a couple things. Remember the Declaration of Independence saying they are free and independent states? So the states wanted to keep some of that power. They want to keep some of that independence. They want to say, the state governments do, about who the president is going to be. And the other thing that this is about here is another thing I keep saying is about distrust. That the people who made this Constitution did not trust. And one thing they didn't trust was regular people to decide. Remember how voting used to go? They were like drunk and could shout out their votes locally. They know that. So they're trying to keep like a system. One reason why they did this is because of how voting worked. And they want to give the states, again, the power. They don't trust the people. Okay. Now, the next thing that they say in the Constitution, this is crossed out over here because the first draft or the first version that came out of the Constitution had a different way of counting the votes. It worked like this. Whoever got the most elector votes was president, and second place became vice president. They thought that system would work really well. But if we still had that today, you'd have President Biden and Vice President Trump. They realized after a few years of elections that, yeah, having the people who were fighting against each other to be president, giving one of them like first and then the other one second place, that's not a good idea. They also didn't know what would happen if there was a tie. There wasn't a plan originally of if there's a tie vote. And that's what happened in 1800, and it made things kind of complicated. So what we've got over here is this is one of the ways that the Constitution has been changed. Again, we can go back to the Declaration of Independence, where people should be able to change things in their government, not for little reasons, but for good reasons. So changing the Constitution does not happen very much. But in 1804, after that one I just told you about, where there was a tie vote and they'd had elections where you had enemies basically sharing president and vice president. So what they did here is there are 2 ballots, and that's the way it works now. You have a ballot, like people running for president, people running for vice president, and whoever got first place for each of those, that's your winner. Makes sense now, right? Another thing they did is the votes are counted from each state, and then they're counted separately, like in the U.S. Capitol. So again, separate meaning like for the president and for the vice president. Each state sends their votes to wherever the capital is. Now it's in Washington, D.C. It was not always in Washington, D.C. And then there's also a plan here if there's a tie. If there's ever a tie vote, that in the elector of the electors, then Congress and again, basically the states are getting to decide. It goes to Congress, and each state gets one vote. Now, what if it's a tie there? There is a whole system for that, but you don't have to worry about that. That's pretty much how far we got in class today. I did point out, I just put this over here. So in the bottom, it says the president of the Senate is the vice president of the United States. And they get to open the things from each state and count the votes. That's what the Constitution says. And on January 6, 2021, you had supporters of Donald Trump. That's when some of them stormed into the U.S. Capitol building when that vote was being counted, because they thought that some votes should not have been counted. And what's kind of awkward is the guy counting the votes was the vice president with Donald Trump, the other Republican. That man, vice president, said, yeah, I'll just count the votes. But some people thought he should have done more than just count the votes, because they read the Constitution to say he has that power. So we talked about that a little bit in class today. But that's about how far we got. So whatever thoughts and reactions you have on that for your daily log, hope you can get them down.